Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Let me turn my little ear off. I know you probably hear it in the background. So here we go. Here we go. If anybody has any questions about Adam and Eve, you can speak down and forever hold your peace. Or maybe some people might have questions about the books. I'm going to be here for a minute, just talking, but just waiting for people to come on in, while I'm live. So I'm just waiting for people to come on in. I know people always have a million questions. Now I have a playlist. Where you can actually watch me go through these objections, these questions that everybody always has about if Adam and Eve didn't exist, what about this? If Adam and Eve didn't exist, what about that? That's kind of like my forte, is talking about the Adam and Eve account, talking about the Genesis account in its cultural context. It's kind of like my forte. I can talk about just about any of the book, primarily Old Testament. I'm an Old Testament scholar. I can talk about the New Testament as well, but primarily I'll talk about the Old Testament and etc. But I usually primarily talk about the Adam and Eve narrative, the Genesis account, how did the Genesis account come to be, and different academic things like that. Because most people's understanding of the Genesis account, I think almost everybody has a magical ass view about Genesis. Everybody has a magical view about how it came to be. Almost every young Christian believes, and maybe even old Christians, just about every Christian, when they first come into Christianity, they have this strange, odd belief that Moses wrote Genesis. And Genesis was a vision given to Moses, and Moses is writing what he sees in this vision. And Moses is divinely freaking writing on a Torah scroll, and that's how we got Genesis. And then people's views evolve from that. So you have some people say, well, Moses didn't write Genesis, but Moses passed on a oral tradition to scribes, and they wrote down the oral tradition. That's a little bit more reasonable, but the evidence doesn't suggest that. Then you have people like me who say, no, Moses didn't write Genesis at all. Genesis came hundreds of years after Moses. Moses doesn't quote Genesis. The Israelites in the wilderness don't quote Genesis. There isn't anything in writing saying they had a scroll of Genesis because it didn't exist yet. It didn't come to be yet. To the one person that's in here, thanks for coming in and listening to me ramble. It didn't come to be yet. It didn't exist yet. So, the evidence, it shows that the Genesis account, at least Genesis chapters 1 to 11, was written around the Babylonian captivity, around 6th century BCE. Genesis chapters 12 to 50 more than likely would have been written in the 7th century BCE, so about 100 years apart. Maybe a little bit more than that, 100, 150 years apart. Max 200, so between 100, 200 years apart. And Genesis chapters 1 to 11, it doesn't have the same literary writing style. It is written with Babylonian cognates, Babylonian loanwords, Babylonian themes, Babylonian polemics. And so, maybe there's all this Babylonian stuff in Genesis 1 to 11 because it was written in Babylon. That's the most logical conclusion. Maybe there's all this Babylonian stuff inside of Genesis because it just was written during Babylonian captivity. There's no other way to explain the Babylonian words, the Babylonian loanwords, Babylonian cognates, Babylonian polemics, Babylonian themes. There's all this Babylonian stuff inside of Genesis. That doesn't mean it's Egyptian. If Moses was an Egyptian, he was raised in the court of the Pharaoh. Moses would have been familiar with Egyptian stories, Egyptian words, Egyptian polemics, Egyptian themes. We don't have any of that in Genesis chapters 1 to 11. We don't have Egyptian stuff in Genesis, which is what we would expect if Moses wrote it. If Moses wrote Genesis, and if Moses was an Egyptian prince, there should be Egyptian stuff in Genesis. But there's not. There's not. There's Babylonian stuff in Genesis. Because maybe Genesis doesn't have Egyptian influence from Moses. If Genesis has Babylonian stuff in it, that means it's influenced by Babylon because it was written in Babylon, because it was written when the Israelites were in Babylonian captivity. So these are the dots that people need to be able to connect. And I know in church, we don't get taught critical thinking. We don't get taught induction, deduction, abductive reasoning. We don't get taught this stuff in church. We don't get taught how to reason. We don't get taught how to come to proper conclusions. We don't get taught how to think. We don't get taught how to go from A to B to C. We don't get taught any of that in church. And so I get it. I get how a lot of this stuff we've never thought about. There's certain questions that we've just never thought about in the church. We've never thought about stuff like, if Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days and it was just him by himself and the devil, how did the author know this? How did the author of Mark and in Luke and in the Gospels, how did they know Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days, him and the devil by himself, if nobody else was there? Or when Jesus is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, it says the disciples kept going to sleep. So if Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane and he's with the disciples and the disciples are all asleep, how the hell does the author know what Jesus said if everybody was sleeping? If everybody was sleeping, nobody was listening. So how does the author know what Jesus said in the Garden of Gethsemane if everybody around was asleep? These are not questions that are meant to make you lose your faith. These are questions that make you think, because we don't ever get taught how to properly think about the shit. We don't know how to think about any of this stuff. Somebody told you, here's a Bible, here's this book, believe this stuff. They never told us why we should believe this stuff or how we come to the conclusion that this stuff is true. Somebody told us it was true, but they never told us why it was true. And so now I'm here and I have to sit down and explain, well, this is how we know what we know because your pastors didn't do it, your daddies didn't do it, your friends didn't do it, your family didn't do it. And, people start deconstructing when they're 40 years old. People start deconstructing when they're 40 years old, 50 years old. And by that time, if you're deconstructing at like 50 and 60, like you're probably done. It's probably too late for you. We got 6 people in here. What's up to the 6 people in the chat? I think y'all can type in the chat. I should be able to see it. But by the time, people get 60, 50, 70 years old and you start deconstructing, that's it. That's it. You're done at that point, because you can't integrate new information into your theology. You're too old. You don't want to look into this stuff anymore. And, you're just like peanut butter and screw it sandwiches. Screw it. So I get it. I get how we don't have the luxury of critically thinking in church. We don't have the luxury of asking these tough questions in church, or even in just our Christian circles. A lot of us have Christian friends who we can't even have these conversations with at all. You can't even hint at something not going in the Bible the way it's literally written to the T. We can't even hint at it. We can't even give a different interpretation, because the minute you give just a hint of a different interpretation, they cast you off the net. You're not a Christian, you're not saved, blah, 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 blah. We can't even hint at critically thinking or thinking differently than the group. You see, my channel struggles. The only time my channel does really good is when I start posting Christian fundamentalist stuff that doesn't challenge people's faith. Look on my channel and look at the videos that don't challenge people's faith, and look at how those videos do great. But the videos where I challenge people's faith and I make us think and I make us critically evaluate the evidence, those videos do horrible, because people don't want to critically evaluate their faith. People don't want what's rational and logically true. People want what's comfortable. Even Christian people, even people in the Christian community, they don't want what's true. We are full of shit. We don't want what's true. We do not want what is true. We want what's comfortable. We don't want to critically evaluate this stuff. God forbid we find out Moses didn't write the Torah, which there is not one Bible verse that actually says Moses wrote the Torah. There's not one Bible verse that actually says that. There's not even a Bible verse that even hints at that. We've been told a lot of this stuff for years and years and years, from the time we were little babies. We've been spoon-fed and told this stuff again and again and again and again from the time we were 5, 6 years old. So by the time we get older, when somebody makes us even question it, we can't even entertain the possibility. We get mad, we get upset, we start yelling at people. We can't even entertain the possibility that we might be wrong. And that doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. That doesn't mean the Bible isn't true. It just means you're wrong about this theological position. That's all that means. You are just wrong on this one theological position. That doesn't mean your entire theology is undone. But that is what people think. People think, oh, if I question this one thing theologically, the whole thing comes undone. That's literally not how this works. That's not how it works. It don't work that way. Your faith needs to be in the perfect life, death, burial, resurrection, and ascension of Christ. That's the game. That's the faith. Our faith isn't in Adam and Eve existing or not. Your faith isn't in whether or not Noah was real. Your faith isn't in whatever Abraham did. Our faith is in the perfect life of Jesus. Jesus incarnated in the flesh. Jesus, who is God, incarnated, right? As a man, God in flesh, lived a perfect life, died on the cross for our sins, right? Was dead for 3 days, resurrected, and ascended to the right hand of the Father. Like, that is what we should have our faith in. And everything else is fair game. We don't want it to be fair game, but it is. Everything else is fair game. And if you have an issue with just entertaining a theological view that's different than yours, then you're going to have a hard time living life, because everybody doesn't think the same way as you. And everybody doesn't think the same way as your church. And everybody doesn't think the same way as Christian fundamentalists. And everybody isn't a biblical literalist. So if you live your life and if you just think everybody who doesn't think exactly the way you think is a heretic and they're going to hell, and you're going to have a hard life. Life for you is going to fucking suck. I'm sorry. It's going to suck. Like we and I'm young, by the way. I'm in my 20s, and I see people in their 20s and younger people, and we're tired. We're tired of people being extremely strict and strenuous about this theology. We're tired of people beating us over the head with a Bible all day, every day. We're tired of it. We are tired. We're tired of every time we have a different theological view, you're going to hell or whatever. We're tired of it. We're not putting up with it. And yeah, for the people who are mad or whatever, I cuss a little bit. If you don't like that, I don't know what to tell you. Go find another YouTube channel. Don't know what to tell you. I'm not going to sit and pretend like I'm a saint. I'm not Saint Augustine or something like that. I'm a regular guy who just happens to have an interest in the Bible. I'm not a saint. I'm not your pastor. I'm not a bishop. I'm a regular guy. I'm a regular black guy who's a Bible scholar who enjoys the Bible. I cuss a little bit. Like I drink a little bit of alcohol. I'm a human being. Like, that's another thing. Like, I'm human, y'all. Like, I'm human. Just like you. I'm human just like you. I'm not Jesus. I'm not the Messiah. I'm not Moses. I wasn't called down from heaven. I'm not the bread of life. I'm not the water of life. I'm just a fucking black guy who likes the Bible, who likes theology, and I'm talking about this stuff. And, I'm not perfect. I'm not a Messiah figure. I'm not a Messiah. I'm not divine. I'm just a guy who likes the Bible. We got some people watching. Comment something. Y'all just staring at me. Comment something. Say something. Y'all just looking at my pretty face. Just looking at me go on my little rant. But this is a lot easier than me making a video and having to edit the video and make it this and make it. I'd rather just do a live stream where I talk about this stuff. And whoever watches it, watches it. Whoever doesn't. Editing videos is a lot of work. You got to edit it and make it this and that and the third. I kind of hate editing videos. Editing videos is a lot. Why am I not seeing comments on here? Maybe y'all are commenting, but I can't see. Let me see. And I can do a poll too. Let's see if I can do a poll. All right, I'm gonna do a poll. Let's see if I can do the poll. There you go. All right, so I started a poll. But this is a lot easier. I really like, even though you are flipper head sometimes. I'm cracking up. Yeah, man, those damn flipper heads. Yeah, man, those flipper heads. But my live access on TikTok is suspended, so I'm like, screw it. I'll just be on here. I don't care. I don't really give a crap about TikTok and their live anyway. If you haven't gotten my books, make sure you go to the link in my profile on here and get my books. I got a whole lot of books on my website where I'll talk about this stuff in more detail. If you want to support me, etc., get my books in my bio. I have 5 books altogether that I've written. Secrets of the Bible from the East are the name of my books. Every person that's gotten my books, they've all said your books have changed my life. Your books have given me really great insight on the Bible. Because once again, like I always talk about, I'm not just teaching theology. I'm teaching people how to critically think about theology and how to critically think about the composition of the Bible and how the Bible came to be. Because a lot of us, we all start off, I started off a Christian fundamentalist. We all start off as Christian fundamentalists. We all start off as biblical literalists. But as you gain more knowledge and as you start looking into the biblical text and how the Bible came to be, you find out, wait a minute, what I got taught or what I got spoon-fed, what the Trinity Broadcasting Network told me when I was 5 years old or 10 years old, that wasn't true. Moses actually didn't write the Torah. That's not anywhere in the Bible, but this is American Christian fundamentalist tradition. We've all been spoon-fed American fundamentalist tradition for years and years and years and years and years. For years. How many of you guys know the rapture is not in the Bible? The rapture is not in the Bible. That came from a little Scottish girl who had a dream, and then it got popularized. How many of you guys know the Bible doesn't say how old the earth is? That came from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And before the Seventh-day Adventist Church, it originally came in the 1600s from an Anglican bishop named Bishop James Ussher in the 1600s. He was the first person to say the Bible, give or take, said the world was 6,000 years old. From the 1600s. Then the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they adopted that view, and then they popularized that view in the 1900s. How many people know that? How many people know that the belief that the earth is 6,000 years old, that got popularized from the Seventh-day Adventist Church? How many people know that the belief that the King James Bible is the Word of God, that also came from the Seventh-day Adventist Church? They came from a book in the 1800s from a Seventh-day Adventist named Benjamin Wilkinson. He wrote his book called Our Authorized King James Vindicated. That came from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Most people hold these views theologically, and they don't know where these views even came from. They don't even know how these views started, where these views came from, where these views began. But we hold these views as if they're the Bible. A lot of these theological views we have are not the Bible. These are somebody else's views that we've adopted and we've made the Bible. That's most theology. Most American Western theology is somebody else's view. Some flipperhead in some time period we've never heard of. Some flipperhead we've never heard of. And we went and we adopted his view. We don't know where this view came from, but we just hold to it. And now in this gospel, now in this Bible. We all have views like that. We all hold to at least one view like that, where we hold to a view, we don't know where it came from. Somebody told us about this view, or we looked at a YouTube video and somebody presented this view in a logical way, and we're like, oh, damn, that makes sense. Not even knowing this view comes from somebody in the 1800s, 1600s, whatever. It happens. That is most of Christianity. We got 6 people in chat or whatever right now. If y'all are enjoying this, just leave a comment if you got any questions or whatever. What questions do you guys have for me? I've been talking to you guys for almost 30 minutes, almost a half an hour. What questions you guys got for me? If you haven't gotten my books, if you want to learn more about this stuff on a deeper level, get my books in my bio. They'll definitely help you out and learn more, etc., etc., etc. What questions you got for me, or talk to me? Say something to me. I feel like I'm just talking to a screen. I'm looking at myself. Look at me. Look at you. Look at me. Somebody say something. So, as you guys know, usually I'm on here talking about Adam and Eve and all this other stuff. People, nobody asked me any questions yet about that or whatever. So, but I got a whole lot of videos in there, among other things and other stuff. So people always like, when are you live, or you had questions for me? So, hey man, ask peace. If you got a question, ask it now and forever hold your peace. So, but theology, it shouldn't be this emotionally charged Because depending on your theology, you can lose your family, you can lose your church, you can lose your position at your church job. Like theology is crazy, man. Theology is crazy. It shouldn't be like that, but it is. It's like that. You know, if you have a different theology than the group, they will, like I said, they will cast you out of the net. God forbid you don't believe the book of Genesis is literal. God, God forbid you think differently about something that's non-salvational than your pastor. God forbid. Now he's casting you out the net. Like theology, it shouldn't be like this. It ought not be like this. So if nobody has any questions, whatever, I guess I'm off here. I gave y'all 20 minutes of my time. If you want to learn more stuff, you can get the books in my bio. I'm off here. If nobody has any questions, I gotta go, gotta run. So all right, y'all have a good rest of the day. I'll be on here later, probably, maybe. We'll see. All right, I'm off here, guys.